Here's one of the criticisms about this word love, that somehow you can go up against the complexities of our world, all of its difficulties, and say, oh, I know what the solution is. All you need is love. Love will solve it. It's easy to say, love is just a child's game. Love is some naive approach to a more complicated world that requires us to be something other than love. And yet, despite all of the complexities of life, from every generation to every generation, and the struggles that have been faced throughout history, this simple idea of love renews itself as being a solution. And that's the attitude that I want us to take today, that despite all the complexities of our world right now, all the struggles that we face, that Paul is right. There is something of God's Spirit that can bear fruit in the world, and that includes love. One of the reasons why love is able to meet the complexities of this world is because it's a complex thing. One of the dimensions, or one of the layers, and we take love and it's like an onion and we peel it back, one of the layers of love that's essential is the idea of belonging. Love is about belonging. And that's why it's sometimes so difficult to hold out love in this world. Because when you love someone you don't know, it's a risk. Because you're extending to that person the possibility that they could belong to the same community as you. I think that's why we are so reluctant to give love to strangers. You think of all those parables that Jesus told, where you meet the Samaritan, you meet the stranger, and who is the good neighbor, who is the one who showed love. The risk in those stories is giving an opportunity to someone who is potentially a threat to you, giving them the opportunity to belong with you, and perhaps for you to belong with them. I think that's scary stuff, but that's how love meets the complexities of this world, because it's got this possibility of belonging happening within it. So let's hold that idea there. Sarah and I have been listening to a podcast when we drive back and forth to places, a podcast called The Art of Small Talk. And it's a light-hearted book, which is extolling the virtues of learning once again how to do small talk in our society. How to just walk up to a stranger and chat them up. How to be standing behind someone in the grocery line and make a comment and strike up a conversation. It's fascinating, though. You ever realize, honey, the irony of it, that because we're listening to the podcast in the car, we're not really doing any small talk. But when you've been married as long as we have, like, what's left to talk about? I've become aware that we have a problem. And it relates to small talk. If I'm in a coffee shop, or maybe I'm in a bar and we're doing karaoke, small talk suddenly is dangerous. Small talk is potentially an opportunity for a fight to break out. And by that I mean engaging someone in conversation these days can so easily go off the rails into arguing, not fist fighting, but word fighting about the state of the world and what is it that you believe and what is it that you think. I'm listening to this podcast about small talk, and I'm thinking, oh my, so many times recently, just innocent conversations that I've started up with people so quickly escalated into me having to defend myself against all kinds of claims. And maybe you can relate. You'll be somewhere out in public and you'll be chatting with someone, and out of nowhere, they'll sort of drop some idea that sounds really weird to you, like conspiracy theories. And before you know it, if you don't agree with the person, they start to get angry at you. And then you're trying to figure out how to get out of the conversation. What I want to talk a little bit about today is how those in-person conversations that we have when we're trying to do small talk, where we're out in our small town trying to create a sense of belonging and community by using small talk, the behaviors that seem to flourish online in social media, the toxic behaviors of punching hard with your words, being offended if someone does not agree with you, wanting to accuse someone of being part of the Illuminati, if I can, throw out a really crazy idea. And yet, when you hear me say it, part of you, I hope, is saying, yeah, we're at this place in society where one little small conversation in person can start to replicate what it's like to talk online, where people want to argue about the world until there's a winner and there is a loser. So let me give you a couple examples. And I appreciate that, depending on what generation you're in, I don't want to look at anyone when I say this, but depending on your generation, you may have never gone onto the computer and had an angry argument via typing with somebody. But it seems to be the norm these days. Take, for example, someone who stumbles into like a flat earth society chat group. Someone who at the very heart is looking to belong somewhere, to be part of a group of people who will accept them. And they start reading, seeing a few videos, and then going in chat rooms where they hear this idea that the world is flat. Now, none of you have ever admitted to me that you think the world is flat, and because we're online, maybe you've got people watching right now who think that the world is flat. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I don't think it is flat. I think it's a sphere. It's like a watermelon, right, Xander? Yeah, that's what Xander had his hand up, and he was about to say, it's like a watermelon. But someone who's looking to be part of the community gets pulled into one of these discussion groups, and they get to belong. They get to feel like they're part of something because the group nurtures a particular kind of behavior and attitude. Us versus them. There is the us who knows, because we have some special knowledge, that the world is flat. And then there's the them. The ignorant, uneducated, the people whose minds are closed, the sheeple, the conspiring experts, the arrogant ivory tower academics. And the more that us and them, the more one participates in that us and them dynamic, the more you get to belong to the heart of these communities. Okay, I think we can all get an understanding of how that works. The problem occurs when that becomes, I'm starting to sound like an old guy, an emerging generation, how you belong online starts to become the template for how it is that you belong in person. The person who's in that flat earth conversation online then shows up at the coffee shop in your small town, and they want to connect with you and belong, and they want you to belong with them, and before you know it, they're telling you, don't you know that the world is flat? And when you say, I'm pretty sure it's not, because Xander told me it's not flat. And then the conversation starts to spiral out of control, because in the mind of the other person, you've rejected their bid for connection. You've rejected their bid to belong to something. You've rejected them as a person. Flat Earth. You may not be as familiar with this one, but it's the sovereign citizen movement. Some of you may like the whole idea. The idea that the state can't tell us what to do. This is big in the U.S. Surprise, surprise. It's a favorite rabbit hole to go down to satisfy the libertarian within each of us. Those of us who had a big brother or sister who loved to say, don't tell me what to do. Don't boss. You're not the boss of me. Yeah, you know what I mean, Xander? That you're not subject to the laws of the state. If you get pulled over by a police officer for speeding on the highway, you learn by participating in these online communities that there's a formula of things you can say to the police officer that supposedly will assert your right to be free to go, and that if the police officer tries to detain you, that they are a thug, they are abusing your freedom because you are a sovereign citizen. Now, these ways of thinking, they start to take on religious overtones. I'm not subject to human law because I only answer to God and God's laws. And you can take all kinds of variations. But there's an example where what one participates in online, these discussion groups to talk about how we're not subject to the state, creep into real life when you are speeding and you do get pulled over by the police officer and you start mouthing off and claiming that you do not need to participate in this stop. You do not need to be a cooperative citizen because you are sovereign. And you've probably heard enough stories of where that can go off the rails. The problem here is that the method of belonging that is nurtured online, that moves so quickly to there's an us and we're right, and there is a them and they're wrong. That then from there it's an easy hop, skip, and jump to we need to protect ourselves from the them. That way of belonging and feeling like you're part of something online creeps into our world and starts to become how we interact with others. Paul is writing about the fruit of the Spirit, and the very first fruit that he names is love. Love comes first. Love, and remember, he's writing to a community of faith that is struggling to get along. Love is the pathway to belonging. But is that pathway one of love, which is what Paul's lifting up, or is it one of hating, setting up an us versus them? As the church, our job is to live in a way where love is the pathway to belonging. That's why we've been tasked with ensuring that when the stranger is among us, that we curtail the instincts within us to feel as though they are a threat. That whenever we encounter the stranger in our midst, instead of seeing them as someone who doesn't belong, we see them as Christ, who is fundamental to our belonging. One of our missions as the church is to be a contrast, to live by contrast by the Spirit to this world. That out there increasingly you belong by hating. Our mission is to take the risk of making sure that we provide space and opportunity for people to belong through love. You are the by contrast, that phrase that we're going to hear again and again through this sermon series. Amen.